Hello again, my fiber friends. I'm ReRe, and this is Exploration Crochet, brought to you by the Yarn Over Hook Network. Have you ever wondered why yarn has a weight system that's basically thickness? Today, we're going to try to make some sense of label chaos, and we're going to look at what yarn weight actually means, why countries disagree, and how to substitute without fear. By the end, you'll have a simple, reliable playbook, plus a printable cheat sheet to keep you and your projects on point. So, for starters, in the hobby world, yarn weight mostly means thickness, how big around that strand is. The thicker the strand, the fewer the stitches fit into an inch. The thinner it is, the more. Factories don't say worsted or bulky, they speak linear density, mass per length or length per mass. You'll hear tex, which means grams per 1,000 meters. The bigger the tex, the thicker the yarn. Denier, which means grams per 9,000 meters. Fashion folk like that one. Nm, which stands for Newton meter, which is meters per gram. The bigger the Nm, the finer the yarn. Li, which is Old French, a unit that measures the linear density of linen yarn. 1 li is 300 yards of yarn per pound. The higher the li, the thinner or finer the yarn. And finally, we have the legacy count systems like NE, which is the English cotton count, and the woolly, which is the Bradford worsted count. For makers, we're trying to keep it simple, so we lean on the Craft Yarn Council categories of 0 through 7, being lace to jumbo, and helpful heuristics like WPI, wraps per inch. These translate industry precision into maker-friendly terms that tell us what hook to grab, what gauge to expect, and how a fabric will behave. And I'm going to say it here, retail names are maps. Your swatch, and I know how a lot of us feel about that, but that swatch is the actual territory. So, let's go and explore the yarn weights and whys.
1, 2, 3.
Travel with me to the late 17 and 1800s when different textile regions specialized in different fibers. Cotton powerhouses in Lancashire and the U.S. South standardized the NE, number English cotton count. A higher number meant a finer yarn. Worsted wool centers around Bradford used the worsted spinning count, originally tied to how many hanks a skilled spinner could get from a pound of combed top. Again, higher number, finer yarn. Linen trades used Li. Continental mills embraced Nm, the Newton meter. And as synthetics entered the scene, tex and denier took root. These systems evolved independently, tuned to local fiber, machinery, and trade habits. No one was designing for a future where a crocheter in Chicago would order a skein of yarn from Melbourne at 2 in the morning. So when hobby knitting and crocheting boomed in the late 20th century, we had a babel of yarn sizes. Europe often prints in M text plus a name. UK, Australia, New Zealand still use ply as a thickness label, not literally strand count. That's how we ended up with DK versus 8 ply versus NM5, all describing the same neighborhood of yarn weight. So, cue the consumer weight layer. In the later 20th century, U.S. trade groups rolled out the Craft Yarn Council, or CYC, which didn't replace industry specs, it sits on top of it, a translator, if you will, for the maker world. The CYC rolled out the 0 to 7 scale and familiar retail names like lace, fingering, sport, DK, double knit, worsted, bulky, super bulky, and jumbo. And if you're curious about who actually makes up the CYC, I'll leave a link for that in the description. Alright, now let's visit ball band land. In the US, most brands print the CYC07 category with suggested hook sizes. As a side note, I don't always agree with the suggested hook sizes. I have watched those suggestions grow over the years. But I digress. In parts of Europe, you'll often see NM next to text, alongside marketing names and gauge focus. In the UK and Australia and New Zealand, you'll still meet the famous ply naming 4 ply, 8 ply, 10 ply, which once literally meant the number of singles twisted together. Today, it's mostly a conventional thickness label, not a count of plies. That's why an Australian 8 ply usually maps to DK, even if it has fewer or more than 8 physical strands. Japan and much of Asia, they use text, detext, NM industrially, but hobby labels lean on gauge and hook size more than named weights. In South America, mills mostly use the same industrial systems you see in Europe, NM, NE, and text. But in the craft world, crocheters are more likely to see local size words in Portuguese or Spanish, numbered cotton threads, and gauge charts. In practice, makers there lean on hook size, stitches per 10 centimeters, and just good old fashioned swatching. And across Africa, there isn't a separate yarn weight system so much as a patchwork of UK style names like DK and Aaron, metric counts like NM, and plain English labels like fine or chunky, plus gauge charts. Just like in South America, makers translate all of that into lace ish, DK ish, worsted ish, with the help of their hooks, eyes, and, let's say it together, swatches. The mix is why crossing borders can scramble our stash language. A sport in one place may be a light DK in another. So you have to read the whole label and pair it with WPI or a swatch. Yeah, a swatch.
Numbers on the shopping list, numbers on the clock, numbers at the station, numbers at the shop.
Okay, so here's the cliff notes of things to remember. Weight isn't just numbers, it's fabric density. So for gauge and fit, thicker yarns equal fewer stitches per inch. So for example, a worsted gauged cardigan made in DK, the number of stitches will grow. In bulky, the number shrinks. With regard to drape and hand, finer yarns at higher gauges equal fluid fabric. Thicker yarns bring structure and cozy loft. When considering time and yardage, lace weight shawl, lots of stitches, lots of time, but airy elegance. Bulky throw, fast, plush, but fewer yards per skein. When you're looking at substitution, matching weight or WPI gets you in the ballpark. Matching fiber plus construction and then, say it with me, swatching gets you home safe. Think of weight as the tempo of your project. Set it right and the whole piece dances. Okay, so here are a few rough rules of thumb you can just keep tucked away regarding those CYC numbers. 0 is lace, superfine, WPI often above 20, tiny hooks, glorious drape. Number 1, fingering, sock, UK 4-ply. Great for socks, baby wear, garments with crisp stitch definition. Number 2, sport weight. Sometimes overlaps with a light DK. Number 3, DK, the Australian and New Zealand 8-ply. The weekend dinner of yarn weights, versatile and friendly. Number 4, worsted Aran, popular here in the US. Just remember, it's not the same as the worsted count used in mills. 5, bulky, cozy hats, fast blankets. Number 6, super bulky, instant gratification, but depending on the project, can really be a yarn hog. And number 7, jumbo, statement crochet, arm scale fabric. Remember, construction matters. A chainette DK can bloom and behave like a loftier worsted. A tight twisted worsted might work up closer to DK gauge. If the size drape of the end result matters, say it with me, swatch. And here's my 5-step substitution checklist. Number 1, match the category or the WPI. That's going to be your baseline. Number 2, match fabric behavior. Wool has memory and bounce, cotton has drape and weight, acrylic has easy care and consistent size, linen relaxes with wear. Number 3, match construction and twist. Singles bloom and read softer. Tightly plied yarns can look smaller at gauge, and chainette, think tiny crocheted tube, actually adds loft but reduces weight. 4, swatch and block. Measure after the fabric relaxes, especially for cotton, linen, and silk blends. And the 5th point, check yardage math. If your original pattern calls for 800 yards of DK and you substitute a loftier worsted, your yardage and your fabric density will shift. Recalculate before you buy. Pro tip, when in doubt, make a 4x4 swatch using the stitches in the pattern. Wash it like the finished product and take notes. Trust me, future you will bless past you.
Okay, so now this is going to take some focus. We are now going to attempt.
Okay, so now let's take a look at some myths. Myth number 1, ply tells me everything. The truth of the matter is today, 8-ply often means DK-ish. Count the strands if you care, but don't rely on the number for gauge. Myth number 2, worsted is worsted is worsted. Retail worsted can swing gauge within the same retail class. Brands have different thicknesses amongst their worsted. So, just because it says 4 doesn't mean it is. Myth number 2, 2 DKs always swap. Fiber and twist change the fabric. One DK can be drapey and light, another can be dense and structured. Swatch and see. Myth number 4, if labels match, no swatch needed. You know, I love the optimism I'm seeing here, but no. If you're making a garment, you really need to swatch. Now let's answer some quick questions. Why do some patterns specify both a weight and a WPI? Because weight bands overlap. WPI helps narrow it down when you're stash diving or shopping internationally. Another question, is there a universal best weight for crochet? The best weight is the one that gives you the fabric you want. Crochet loves a range from fingering lace doilies to bulky throws. Choose based on drape, stitch definition, and how quickly you want to finish. Question 3. I found a cone labeled NM 3.5. Can you help? Sure. So we're looking at Newton meters. So that's about 3.5 meters per gram. Convert to tex, 1,000 over 3.5, which is approximately 285 tex. So that puts you in the DK to worsted neighborhood. Swatch to confirm. And finally, the question that probably everyone is wondering, do I personally swatch? Only when I'm making a garment. Well, so there you have it. Yarn weight is a story about how makers meet industry. Mills speak in tex, denier, and NM. We speak in DKs, worsted, and WPI. The magic is that both are right, just different dialects for the same thread. So to help, I put together a printable and portable yarn weight conversion sheet. And this chart has all the things: CYC information in addition to common terms, UK weight information, Australian ply information, crochet gauge information, WPI numbers, NM to text conversion information, has US hook sizes as well as millimeter hook sizes, and common uses for each yarn weight. I'll leave a link for that in the description.
Numbers, what's not to count?
If today's episode helped untangle your label speak, share it with a friend. Leave a rating and tag us with your favorite weight plus stitch combination. We'd love to hear it. I'm ReRe, and thanks for listening. See you next time.
Oh, numbers on keyboards, numbers on cars. There are numbers on calculators. Numbers on a ticket, numbers on a bus, numbers on a telephone. Please call.